guys, welcome back. Today we are going to continue talking about the Beastmen. And we're going to get started with a little story here. The blasphemy of Blood Gorge. The Beastmen instinctively know that blasphemy is the dark reflection of reverence, and that to defile the image or shrine of a god is to rob that entity of power. It is the wish of the ruinous powers, and therefore the innate desire of the Beastmen themselves, to diminish and ultimately destroy the weakling gods of man. These feeble deities do not deserve their place in the heavens next to the old and primal gods of chaos. Upon a windswept heath before the mighty forest of Ardennes is to be found a blasphemy most pleasing to the chaos gods. For many years, the war herds dwelling in the forests had suffered the presence of a powerful and devout sorceress, a damsel residing in a fortified retreat near the forest's edge. Many war herds had assailed her sanctuary only to be repulsed by the magics of the damsel and the spears of her loyal retainers, or else driven off as valiant knights rode to the she-witch's rescue. And so it was that a beast lord named Cloven Blood Gorge gathered a great bray herd and embarked upon the campaign that would earn him the bitter enmity of every knight in Bretonnia. Cloven's shamans summoned flocks of harpies, foul-winged creatures of the air. Bound to Cloven's will, the harpies swept through the night, swooping down upon the sentries manning the high walls of the sanctuary. As the sentries were dragged screaming from the walls, the sanctuary's defenders mustered to repel the attackers, rushing up stone steps to face this terrible new foe. At that moment, the night was rent by the deafening bellow of our gargantuan Gorgon at full charge, followed a moment later by the ear-splitting report of the sanctuary's gates splintering away. Within minutes, Cloven's gores were flooding the sanctuary. Soon, every building within was aflame. The defenders put up a spirited defense, but had been caught unawares. The spells of the sorceress slew dozens of beastmen, but it was not enough, and the defenders were overwhelmed. The survivors were bound and carried back to the forest. A tall stone statue of the she-witch's goddess stood at the altar of the now burning chapel. This the harpies carried off, 100 of their numbers straining to lift it into the night air and bear it towards the forest. It was several days before the men came, as Cloven had known they would. Countless knights crested the rise and came to a halt half a league from the forest. What had caused them to halt was the statue itself, smeared in filth, its serene countenance disfigured beneath a horned crown of twisted branches and the bones of the captives. Seeing this blasphemy, a great war cry went up from the knights. Ranks became disordered as men bellowed their outrage at one another and their unseen foe. Just then, Cloven Blood Gorge stepped out from the forest's edge, and with him countless numbers of his followers. Behind Cloven stood 100 elite bestigors, snorting and stamping in their barely restrained eagerness to set about the killing. Stretching out either side were the massed gores, their crude braying and the droning of their war horns drowning out all other sound. Amongst the horde there strode frenzied, four-armed Gorgons, each restrained from charging headlong only by the will of Cloven Blood Gorge. Seeing their quarry, the knights roared and spurred their mounts forward as one. Cloven bellowed an answer, and the horde surged forward in a great mass. Fired as each man was by rage and bitterness, the knights fought not as an army, but as individuals, each vowing to be the one to claim vengeance. The war herd of Cloven Blood Gorge fought with the single-minded determination instilled in them by the power of their leader. Though the knights ran down scores of beastmen as their charge hit home, the beastmen eventually dragged their foes to the ground, unhorsing them and hacking them to ragged chunks in the mud. The battle raged from midday until the setting of the sun, and by the end the bestigors held aloft a dozen of the men's banners, no longer bright and proud, but befouled and tattered. As the last of the knight's underlings fled the field, Cloven regarded a scene of unsurpassed slaughter and knew he had done well. The defiled statue had stood ever since, a dread mockery of all that the Bredonians hold dear. Many have come to cast it down, and all have died at the hands of the Beastmen. Of the sorceress nothing was ever heard again. The one thing is for sure, her own tale did not have a pleasant ending. The Endless Hunt. The Beastmen build no cities, for order and construction are anathema to them. They roam far and wide, following the scent of fresh meat and hunting to death whatever wanders into the ancient blood grounds that the Beastmen patrol. The old world is the territory and the hunting ground of the Beastmen, lands they regard and refer to as their blood grounds. It has always been so since the beginning of chaos in a distant and legendary age. The Beastmen are tough and strong, for they must compete with the unimaginable horrors that haunt the woods. Beneath the dark forest canopy, the Beastmen are often the prey of yet more disturbing creatures. Though the Beastmen dwell within the forests, they rarely stay in one location for long. Instead, they move from place to place along ancient paths within the territory of each war herd, occasionally encroaching upon the domains of other tribes. Though no sane man can make sense of it, there is sometimes a pattern to these movements, sudden changes in direction or an uncanny coordination between disparate war herds that hint at a far greater plan. When a halt is called, the Beastmen establish temporary sites from which to launch their merciless invasions of the surrounding areas, and where they will hold their bloodthirsty celebrations afterwards. They usually stay in one place only for a short time before moving to find another suitable site for their hunting grounds. Beastmen war herds will often roam for hundreds of miles before setting up camp again, frequently battling other Beastmen for the choicest spots. The Beast Paths. The vast forests of the old world are crossed by a spider's web of paths only the Beastmen know. Where these paths crossed, there is to be found a site that is in some way significant to the Cloven Ones. These beast paths are located deep in the forests, far from the towns and highways of man, yet they are far from hidden. Though native to the deep woods, the Beastmen are not naturally creatures of concealment and guile. When passing through the dense woodlands, they simply barge their way through the foliage and trample flat the undergrowth. Over millennia of use, the beast paths have become deep ruts in the ground, strewn with the bones of the enemy and other detritus. So dense is the undergrowth that grows on the embankments, the chances are that no human tracker or huntsman seeking a beast path would find one other than by pure happenstance. Any huntsman who did stumble upon a beast path would be extremely wise to turn and flee, for a war herd might be traveling the path, and his own bones may soon be added to those discarded upon it. Occasionally, two Beastmen war herds will run into one another whilst traveling in opposite directions along the beast path. In such cases, the chieftains of each tribe will barge their way to the fore and meet in the center of the pathway to decide which tribe will stand aside and allow the other to pass. Amidst much bravado and exaggerated strutting, the chieftains will engage in vulgar displays of power until one either stands aside or, far more likely, the two come to blows. The ensuing combat will consist of the two chieftains clashing horns and headbutting each other until one is knocked unconscious, and the winner determined. The winner's tribe will then pass along the beast path, the grinning Gors only pausing to relieve themselves upon the prostrate form of the defeated chieftain. Hunting the blood grounds. Every single creature within the Beastmen's blood grounds is prey, whether it flees as do the goblins, evades as do the wood elves, or fights back as do the men. Even the act of marching to war is akin to the hunt, of tracking and stalking the prey. Battle itself is like unto the act of a predator running down its prey, or the clash of rivals fighting to the last to determine the right to leadership and territorial dominance. The Beastmen that lurk within the forest example, are constantly at war with others who would shelter in its darkness. Every new day the warherds clash with forest goblins, human bandits, and the shambling hordes of rotten corpses raised by reclusive necromancers who hide from prying eyes in the woods. Because of this, the warherds of the Forest of Shadows, though fewer in number, are amongst the strongest and most belligerent in the entire old world. When their strength waxes and they dominate their rivals within the Forest of Shadows, they make war upon foes outside of it. It is then that the lands of men truly know the raw strength of the Beastmen. Occasionally, the warherds of the Forest of Shadows have fought such successful wars against the others that dwell there that their enemies have been driven out of the forest to plague the lands all about. Such was the case when the warherd of Ulruk the Red Horn launched a genocidal war against the forest goblins of the Bitter Eye tribe. The war lasted 3 entire seasons, culminating in the remains of the forest goblin horde being driven from the woods straight towards the empire town of Verlangen. The defenders of the town had barely time to muster before being overrun with screaming greenskins. Sensing weakness, the pursuing beastmen crashed into those men who had survived the wave of forest goblins, hacking down the last of their number and putting the town to the torch. Less common a foe than the forest goblins are the wood elves, who are held in contempt by the beastmen race for their love of stealth over strength. Most clashes between the two races are fought on the verges of the supernatural forest of Athelloren, east of Bretonia. To the beastmen, the wood elves are yet another foe competing for land, to be taught their place in the world at the sharp end of horn and blade. Conversely, the wood elves hate the children of chaos with a burning passion, for the beastmen are the opposite of all they stand for. When the two races encounter one another, a raging battle occurs. Should the beastmen prevail, they take perverse delight in chasing the elves down with packs of specially trained hounds. A beastman that catches and eats a wood elf earns the honorific Fey Killer, and little else, for the beastmen find elf flesh stringy and unsatisfying, with barely enough meat on the bone to feed an Ungor. After a successful attack, a warherd will celebrate through the night, parading drunkenly around the fire, feasting on captives and glutting themselves on the spoils of victory. These celebrations resonate throughout the forests and are often audible in the towns of men. On those nights when the Bray shamans enact the foulest of their rituals by the light of the Moor's Lieb, the Chaos Moon, the darkness is split by fearful screams and hideous chanting. No watchman will stray far from the light on such nights, for to wander into the shadows is to give oneself to the creatures that lurk in the dark. By noon the following day, the herd will have moved on, leaving destruction and devastation in their wake. Should any man summon the courage to investigate the cause of the previous night's disturbances, he may find a clearing dominated by smoking ashes, but he would do well to avoid examining too closely the grisly detritus scattered about the defiled woodland glade. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to call this video here. I know that all these Beastmen videos have been short, and I'm sorry about that, but I am recovering from a cold, and so talking for too long, I end up having to clear my throat a lot, as you've probably already heard, and that just doesn't make for a great video. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.